I'm new to posting, so forgive me if I'm doing this wrong. For context, I'm a young girl who tends to attract a lot of attention in public. I'm used to looks and stares. I guess I would be considered conventionally attractive. Also, for context, I'm pretty much always alone. I don't have any friends, and my boyfriend doesn't like to leave the house much. I was going to the mall to make a few returns from things I'd gotten online. I don't usually go to the mall, seeing that it's a bit farther away than the malls close to me. But this was the only mall with the stores that I needed to return things at. Although I did go in the mall alone, my mom was in the car. We had dinner plans previously and planned to go out to eat after I made my returns. It was exceptionally crowded, so she decided to stay in the car while I made my returns. Things went smoothly for a while, up until the last store. I couldn't find it, and spent maybe 30 minutes wandering around the crowded mall trying to find it. I finally called my mom saying I was giving up, trying to find the last store, and that I would be heading out soon. I kept hearing a girl behind me say, "Excuse me, miss." I finally decided to turn around, hoping everything was alright. The girl had a baby carriage with her and stood close to me. I recognised her from a previous store I was in. She was there with another man. She said, "There was a guy following you for a long time. He had his phone out and was recording you and taking pictures." I immediately turned to see if the man was there and saw her male friend yelling in the direction of said guy. I was immediately chilled to the bone. The man was white and middle-aged with a black sweatshirt on. He ran into a nearby crowded department store as soon as he was confronted. I thanked the girl profusely and spotted another girl talking with the nearby security guard and pointing to me and in the direction that the man went. As I walked back to my mom's car, I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if those kind people hadn't stepped in. Maybe I'm paranoid, but sex trafficking is huge and I fear I could have been a victim to it. What if those people hadn't confronted him and he followed me to my car? What if my mom wasn't there and I was alone with my car and that man? One of the worst things about the situation is that the man still has those pictures and videos of me on his phone. Lord knows what he's using those for. I've had issues with things like this in the past, but never to this extent. Also, is this the first time that this has happened to me? Or just the first time that someone stepped in? This happened today and I'm currently on Amazon purchasing some pepper spray. Maybe I'm just being dramatic or paranoid, but it would be so nice to leave my house without worrying about these things happening. Stay safe, everyone. Hopefully one day that creepy man gets what he deserves. I went dancing with friends and I was really drunk by midnight. Unfortunately, this was back when I had little money, and I realised you could save money by eating very little before going out, and it would take far fewer drinks to get drunk. So I was so drunk, I barely remember my friend ordering me an Uber home. My phone was dead, of course. I can vaguely recall them helping me into the car and telling me to get home safe. I don't remember greeting the driver, or the first minute or so. But soon after getting in, he asked how my night was, and if I smoked. Honestly, I was just thinking about bed at this point, so I just sort of slurred out that I did sometimes. He then offered me a joint, and this is the first moment I get sort of nervous and began paying attention. I'd tell him something like I'm really tired and I'm just ready to get home. I think it said something about it being an indica-based joint, and it made for great sleep. Once again, I say something like not exactly no, but not a yes, which he takes as a yes, I'll take that joint now. Once again, I'm still drunk enough I can barely see straight or speak clearly. So when he says, "Okay, well I have to cancel the ride really quick because I can't give it to you while I'm on the clock," or something to that effect, it takes me a second to realise how dangerous that is. And by the time I start to say something, he's cancelled the ride and pulls over. We were in an alley just east of the Hawthorne Bridge, I think, and I was totally secluded. Some empty parking lots, a closed auto body shop, no one in sight. It's starting to hit me. I'm now in the car, not with an Uber driver, but with some stranger. I can't call anyone, and he's trying to give me weed that could have anything in it. For the next minute or so, we're pretty quiet. or I just can't remember any small talk he tried to make because I was beginning to panic. And every time he handed me the joint, I would take fake hits, just breathing it into my mouth and not into my lungs. I felt tired, clumsy, and weak. That kind of drunk where you're almost at the point of nausea. And I knew I couldn't do much of anything to defend myself at that point. I remember vividly being fixated for a moment on the fact I didn't have a pair of keys to defend myself with, as my building used fobs for just about everything, and I didn't take my mail key with me. As I'm freaking out, I look up to see if this guy is sort of noticing, and I make eye contact with him in the mirror. He was staring at me, but I couldn't read his expression. Finally, he says something along the lines of, "Well, let's get out of here." I tell him I'll just call another Uber to get home, thinking at this point it might even be safer to walk, and he says, "No, I still have your address. I'll just take you home." For a moment I was relieved. I guess I wanted to believe him so badly that I would get home safe. I tried to calm myself down, thinking he hadn't actually done anything threatening. Maybe he was just your typical stoner guy and I'm overreacting. At this time, I live on PSU campus in downtown Portland in the southwest area of the city. He's driving me north, on the east side of the river. There are several bridges to our left, and as he keeps moving north, he has several opportunities to take an exit to hop over the river and get me back downtown. He keeps skipping them. We keep passing bridge after bridge that could get me home. Up in northeast Portland, there are some large industrial areas that can get very isolated at night. And Portland in general is surrounded by lots of forests, so I knew he could have had me in a secluded area really quickly. After he passes like the fourth exit for a bridge, pretty sure it was Broadway Bridge, I've been racking my brain for a way to make him actually take me home and say something to the effect of, "Hey, my boyfriend is waiting for me at home," which was true, though I said it in a very meek way. My driver says nothing, but he did take the next exit for a bridge and basically hung a giant U-turn that started taking me home. Even as we're on the west side of the town heading south, I'm still shaken and have my hand on the door handle, thinking about just hopping out at a red light the closer we get to my apartment. My phone is completely dead, and he honestly still has several chances to hop onto nearby highways and speed out of the city. We're getting pretty close to my apartment now, and I'm once again trying to convince myself I'm being paranoid about some stoner that can't navigate the city. Although a few minutes before I was so scared I was crying. So once we get about 2 blocks from my apartment, I lie and tell him it's easiest to stop here and he can let me out. Again, he doesn't say anything, but he does slow the car. I'm flooded with relief and even feel myself smile. But when I go to open the door, it's locked. I try to lift the lock mechanism manually, but it won't budge. I look up at him instinctively to see what's up, and he's got his head turned almost fully toward me, shoulders still facing the road, smiling at me. The worst fucking smile I've ever seen. It looked so mocking and it just did not reach his eyes at all. I just started crying and asking him to open the door. I was so freaked out and still very drunk, and thank God he did. I will never forget the sensation of vulnerability, not just being drunk in his car with no way to contact anyone, but even as I got out the car, I kept feeling like he would somehow grab the back of my shirt and pull me back in, as silly as that sounds. When I got home, I found out my boyfriend had actually gone out with friends last minute, and he wasn't even home. He wouldn't have even known till much later I had gotten safe back. The next day, I convinced myself I was freaking out over nothing, which I realised still could be the case, but in my gut, I had truly felt in danger the night before. Technically, this guy could have been totally harmless, but I still think I should have texted my friend and had her report him. The big thing that made me think of this was recently hearing how Ed Kemper, co-ed killer, would go for practice runs, picking up hitchhikers and seeing if he could get the passengers or potential victims to trust him, or how far out of his comfort zone he could push them without saying anything. Obviously, this guy wasn't Ed Kemper, but I hate wondering if that night was a practice run of sorts for my Uber driver. I was around 13 years old at the shopping centre with my parents. I wanted to go off on my own and wander around by myself for a while, and my parents agreed. After a little while, I was stopped by a woman in casual clothes. She told me that she was an undercover cop, and I was suspected of shoplifting. Because I was young, I was terrified. I didn't ask her for ID or anything like that. I didn't know I could question authority. She asked to look through my bag, and I let her, insisting I hadn't stolen anything. She asked me how old I was, who I was there with. Then she asked me something that still sends chills down my spine. Are your parents expecting you to go home with them tonight? I told her, of course they are. Why wouldn't they be? She then insisted that I had to follow her to go and figure out this shoplifting thing. I went. She was leading me towards the exit. By the grace of God, before we got there, we bumped into my dad. He asked what was going on, and I told him. As I was explaining the situation, the woman got on her phone and was talking to someone saying things like, "Oh, this isn't the right girl," then hangs up and says, "Sorry, wrong person," and abruptly walks off. My dad and I stood there dumbfounded. When my mum found out about the situation, she was really unimpressed by the way the undercover cop handled the situation. She took me to centre management the next day and complained to them about how I was treated by their cop, when the woman answers, "We don't employ undercover cops in this centre." I have no idea what that woman had planned for me, but I thank my lucky stars every day that we ran into my dad. In September of 2002, my wife was in her 7th month of pregnancy with our first child. We lived in Ohio at the time, and she wanted a baby shower. Since most of her family and close friends lived in Baltimore, Maryland, we planned that we would travel to Baltimore and have the baby shower there on Saturday, October 19th, 2002. But October 3rd and 4th brought the horrifying realization that a serial killer was on the loose in the Baltimore, D.C. area. We naturally re-examined our plans, but decided to go through with them all the same. After all, the likelihood of being this sniper's victim was practically zero from a statistical point of view. My wife and I listened to the news of the Beltway sniper in the days leading up to our trip. It was getting a bit more scary as the death count raised to 9, and there were 2 additional people who had been wounded. In the 11th hour, we decided we would still go, but we would take the PA Turnpike over to I-70, and then I-70 through Hagerstown, Maryland, then Frederick, Maryland, and into Baltimore. Around 5 p.m. on Friday, October 18th, 2002, my wife and I picked up my mum and my stepsister and we set out for Baltimore. The trip was going slowly, but otherwise uneventful. We'd used the time to review the plans of what to do when we needed to stop during our trip out. The plan was that we all go together. We didn't dilly-dally, we got out of the car and into a building quickly and vice versa, and no one stays in the car alone. Well, as it happens eventually, around 12:45 a.m. on Saturday morning, we all needed a restroom break. We pulled off into a rest stop near Frederick and parked right in front of the door to the bathroom facility. The rest area was largely empty, but there was a dark blue, late model, 4-door sedan parked head-in facing the door to the restroom. I parked next to it and we all quickly reviewed the rules. If I finished first, I would wait for them and we would all return to the car together. We then got out and raced to the restrooms. As I ran into the restroom area, I didn't pay too much attention to the car we parked next to, other than to make sure they didn't open their doors. The night was crisp and full of moisture. I finished first and so stood out by the exit, but stayed inside by the building. The doors and the walls were all glass, so I nervously scanned the parking lot for anything off-looking. Satisfied that there was nothing ominous in the parking lot, I turned my attention to the blue sedan. I travel a lot, so I naturally took note of their license plates were from New Jersey. In the front seat were 2 African-American males. The one behind the steering wheel was middle-aged. He was awake and staring back at me. Next to him was a sleeping teenager. I remember feeling a chill go down my spine as I watched him watching me. At this time, the authorities hadn't released info on the snipers, and they didn't know of the ominous role the car played in their killing spree. So I was ignorant of the danger these 2 really presented. A few minutes passed before my family returned and we all ran back to the car. In a flash, we sped away and continued on to our destination. I remember noticing something weird about their trunk. My family was poor growing up, so we sometimes had to pop out a broken lock and couldn't afford to fix it right away, so we would rig the trunk to open using a screwdriver. I remember thinking that's what they must have done with their trunk. It turns out it was the hole they would shoot out of while staying concealed. The baby shower went well and my wife had fun. We did not go out for meals, but slept and ate at her mom's house in Baltimore. On Sunday morning, it was time to go. We took a much more northern route home, just to be safe. About a week or so later, once they captured the Beltway snipers, you can imagine the renewed chills down my spine when in the newspaper, the face of the man that had been staring at me when we stopped at P at the rest stop, John Allen Muhammad, was staring back at me again. There was also a photo of the car we had parked next to, and scarier still, the reports that they had been captured in the exact same rest stop where we had parked next to them about a week earlier. I can only assume that the teenage boy that had been asleep next to him was Lee Boyd Malvo. Fortunately, they were both in the front seat, and this was where they had planned to hide out and sleep, so couldn't have likely have killed at this rest stop. Therefore, I feel we weren't in danger during this encounter. Had it been elsewhere though, we may well have been. This is an incident that occurred when I was around 9 years old. Even today, as a 34-year-old female, I still think about what could have been. As a child, my parents both worked full-time, and sometimes they couldn't find or afford a babysitter when I had winter, summer, spring break. So, I would be home alone until either one of them returned from work. There were two main rules. Number 1, never answer the door. Number 2, don't play too close to the windows in case someone is watching. I was 100% guilty of hanging near the window. I liked the lighting and I was a bored kid. Come on. No one had ever knocked on the door before while I was alone. So my father leaves for work and he goes over the rules again. After a few hours of playing near the window, someone knocks on the door. I freeze. I don't answer. They knock again. At this point, in my little mind, I'm thinking it has to be someone I know if they're knocking twice. So I answer. I open the door and there's an intimidating woman with a clipboard, wearing a hat with an American flag on it. Very official looking to a child. She asks how old I am. I lie and say I'm 12. She says she is from the institution that I can't remember. She tells me, "You're a liar. You're home alone and it's illegal. You have to come with me now. Let's go." I start crying very loudly because I'm scared to get my parents in trouble. And after all, this woman is an adult. She must be right? I almost went with her. I started crying even louder. A neighbour made a noise in our complex, and the lady all of a sudden tells me, "Never mind, it's okay. You don't have to come with me. Shh." She hurried off. At the time, my parents weren't doing well financially, so I didn't have a landline. Cell phones? Not in 1996. Couldn't call my family, couldn't call 911. I waited all day for my dad to come home. I'm assuming that she knew I was alone because she'd been watching me. I never really spoke on the incident because I felt like it was my fault for breaking the rules. I often think about how lucky I am that I didn't leave with her. It was a Thursday in August 2002. I was 12 years old and I'd lived with my mom for the past 6 years, since she and my dad got divorced. Soon after their divorce, my mom met a new man who moved in with us a few months later. Looking back, I can remember a few times where he'd shown red flag behaviour. Like one evening, maybe in '99, when that's me and my sisters, we shared the weekends between our mum and dad, were watching a TV show finale very late. He was drunk and came into the living room, smashed the TV with his hands. Back then the TV screens were made of glass, so he cut his hand badly and yelled at us while bleeding. My mom forgave him after he probably came up with a million excuses in the following days. Anyways, in the beginning of 2002, my mom finally decided to have a break in their relationship, and me and her moved into a different apartment a few miles away to get some distance. Me, still being the naive kid who thought she could have 2 kids, wasn't very excited about the idea. I already hated seeing my mom and dad split up, and now I had to go that to let go of a man I'd gotten used to over the course of all these years. I was still just a kid and ignored all the signs, and I even remember resenting my mom for leaving him. As I said, my story starts on Thursday the 8th of August 2002. I was in school and not feeling very well. I also noticed some type of rash on my hips. So my teacher sent me to the doctor and the diagnosis was shingles. I still see the doctor right in front of me, telling me that if the rash gets worse and goes all the way around my hip, I could potentially die. So I went home for the day and was allowed to stay home the next day, Friday the 9th as well. On Friday morning, my mum woke me up about 20 minutes before she went to work so she could check on me, have a little breakfast with me, and bring me back to bed to make sure I'd rest. After she left, I remember lying in bed and being relieved the rash had gotten better overnight, when I suddenly heard a noise from the hallway. My room was not connected to the hallway, so I could only see into the adjacent room, and since my mum had left a couple minutes prior, I assumed it was her and called for her. Seconds later, my mum's ex-boyfriend appeared in the doorframe, asking me what I was doing home, why I wasn't in school. After I told him I was sick and had shingles, he immediately said to me how much he missed us kids and my mom, how sorry he is for not being there, that he could love to talk to my mom and make things right. Since I was still unhappy about their breakup, I said stupid shit like I missed him too, and I wanted them to get back together. I can't believe I seriously believed that at some point. After a few minutes of small talk and him pretending to care about my well-being, he made me promise not to tell my mom that he came by before we left. I obviously told her the minute she came home, because I couldn't keep secrets from her, and I also just wanted her to know. And again, me being a stupid 12-year-old, I didn't even question how he entered the apartment, without a key, without someone opening the door for him. I never in a million years would have thought that this might be illegal or inappropriate behaviour. I knew that man, and he had lived with us for a number of years now. The same day, just a few hours later, my dad drove me to my grandma's, as I had planned weeks in advance to stay the weekend with her, and I already felt much better. My mum was supposed to pick me up on Sunday, but on that morning, my mum hadn't answered her phone for about 12 hours, which was unusual. A friend of the family picked me up, drove me home, and still no news from my mum. Since there's a rule in my country that a person has to be missing for 24 hours before breaking the door to the apartment, and she got missing on Saturday evening, the police was only allowed to open the apartment on Sunday evening. My sisters, my dad, and me all went inside. I grabbed all my school supplies and went to the bathroom. After exiting the bathroom, I found my mum's dental prosthesis on a counter in the hallway. Not realizing it could be potential evidence, I picked it up and brought it into the kitchen where my dad was sitting with a police officer. My dad later told me that as soon as he saw the prosthesis, he knew something had happened. My mum had her teeth fixed just a few months prior and would not leave the house without it. After picking up our stuff from the apartment, my dad drove us back to his house and we waited. Monday morning, and still no message from my mum. We did not go to school that Monday, but planned to the next day. Tuesday morning, I woke up on my own, even though Dad had said he would wake us up and take us to school. I was about to go downstairs when I saw the village priest leaving our house. Police had found my mother the night before. On Monday evening, one of my mum's neighbours went upstairs to do laundry in the attic when he noticed one of the doors being locked. No resident from the apartment building had a key to this specific room, so they had to call the landlord to open the door. I try not to think about what they discovered, since it was the middle of the summer and my mum had been dead for around 48 hours. My mum was murdered by her ex-boyfriend after he returned to the apartment on Saturday afternoon to talk. The last person my mum spoke to was my aunt. Shortly before they hung up, my mum said, "There's someone knocking at the door. It's him again. I gotta hang up. Call you later." He gained access to the apartment the same way he did on Friday, with a credit card. He was arrested only a day later in a bar after telling the barman that he had done something really stupid. Well, no shit, Sherlock. 8 months later, in April of the following year, me and my older sister had to testify in the murder trial. But before we gave our testimony, our father argued with the court and made sure that we didn't have to face the killer. I remember sitting down in a large and very cold room, my father right by my side, holding my hand, lawyers to my right and to my left, as well as the judge in front of me, I remember being asked about the day he came into our apartment and answering all of the questions as truthfully as I could. They sentenced him to 9 years in prison. Manslaughter, in effect, was the official cause. 7 of the 9 years he spent behind bars, and as far as I know, he moved back close to our hometown, close to where it all happened. Over the years, people have told me that I was lucky. He could have killed me and my mom if she had been still at home that day. If she had just left a few minutes later, maybe she would have run into him downstairs and he gained entry into the apartment while we're still eating breakfast. Lots of ifs and could-haves. I know I won't be able to change the past, but I sure hope I can control my future. So to my mom's ex-boyfriend, the man who does not have a name because he doesn't deserve one, let's never meet again. This happened many years ago. I was 8 or so at the time, and every day I would walk home from my elementary school. My house was a few miles down the road, so my mother thought it would be safe enough for me to walk by myself. It was a few months into the school year when it started happening. A beat-up looking Toyota would slow down enough for a couple of white guys that looked like they were in their mid to late 20s to follow me and yell insults at me. I was chubby back then, so they would call me fat and much more hurtful things. I'll always remember the driver. He looked to be the oldest of the bunch with greasy blonde hair hanging down and partially covering his pimped, scared face. They would follow me until I reached the gas station that was halfway along my journey home. Then they would speed off, laughing loudly. For the first couple of weeks, I didn't tell anyone, thinking they would get tired of it. They didn't. A full month passed before I told my mother about it. She, of course, was rightly concerned about me and asked me how long it had been going on for. When I told her a month, she grew even more concerned. Her being a single mum, she couldn't pick me up from school because she was at work all day. So her solution was to send my older brother to meet me halfway. Thinking this would defer them. It didn't. Another 4 months went by with them continuing to follow me and throw insults at me. Then suddenly, it stopped. A whole month went by without them driving by, and we thought everything was safe again. We were wrong. Suddenly, out of the blue, I saw the old beat-up Toyota heading down the road towards me. Only the driver was in the car this time. He slowed down the car, flung open the passenger door, and proceeded to yell for me to get into the car. I was so scared I couldn't even speak. I just shook my head no and tried to walk faster. He continued to following me, demanding that I get into his car. I'll never forget the look on his face as he yelled at me. It was so full of rage. We finally got to the gas station and I made a break for it. I ran inside the station and up to the attendant. I told him what was happening and he let me hide behind the counter. The driver pulled into the gas station, hopped out of the car and came in. He demanded that the attendant tell him where I was. Claiming I was his daughter and I jumped out of his car. The gas station attendant glanced down at me and I shook my head, wildly mouthing that I did not know this man. The attendant said he didn't know where he was talking about and that he had to leave the store immediately. The driver began to yell wildly and started walking around the store looking for me. The attendant said he was going to call the police if the man did not leave. The man turned to him and said something I'll never forget. "I'll get that bitch, one way or another." The driver stormed out of the gas station and left. I sat there on the floor crying for what felt like hours. The attendant called the police and had them come over. When the police arrived, the attendant told them what had happened. A police officer knelt down beside me and asked me my side of the story. I told him everything. How him and a couple of others have been following me for months, how they would follow me and insult me, how they suddenly stopped, and how he tried to get me into his car. I don't remember much afterwards, other than them calling my mother and her meeting at our house. They took my mother's statements and then left. After that, my mother changed her work hours in order to come get me every day. For years, I lived in fear that that man with the greasy hair and pimple-scarred face would eventually get me. So to the man who followed me for months, insulting me and eventually trying to get me into his car, I'm not that scared little girl anymore. We better never meet.